Alrighty guys, this is going to be a quick one. This is going to be another responding to the comments type video, and this particular comment is about reasonable articulable suspicion and whether or not an officer needs that in order to talk to a citizen. Well, I am here to tell you that no, a police officer does not need reasonable articulable suspicion in order to talk to you. They don't need reasonable suspicion to talk to you. They don't have to believe that you are a criminal or that crime is afoot whatsoever. A police officer can walk up to any citizen that they want and talk to that person. Now, the times where reasonable suspicion and probable cause and all that starts to come into play is when a police officer wants to detain somebody. If you're going to detain somebody and search them for weapons, require them to give you their name and information, that is when you need reasonable suspicion. The reason I'm making this video today is this is a comment that I saw a bunch of different variations of today on, let's see, I've got the video up right here. Oh, sorry, that's my email. That was me emailing something to myself. It was this video right here where I said that the inspector general, the investigation manager, and then Benjamin Reese all needed to be fired for being incompetent and lying about the kid's race on this case that they thought was bias-based profiling, which was clearly not bias-based profiling. The kid wasn't black, so it wasn't biased. And then also the officer didn't violate this kid's rights because he never actually stopped and detained this person. All he did was pull up alongside of this kid and say, "Hey man, what's your name? I think I've talked to you before. I can't quite remember your name." The kid's like, "Yo man, leave me alone. I didn't do shit. You're harassing me." The officer's like, "I'm not harassing you. I'm just trying to remember your name. I know you from somewhere and I can't quite place it." And then that kid went home. He said, "Mommy, this cop's harassing me for no reason." His mommy called the officer inspector general. The inspector general said, "Your son's black, isn't he? I know he's black. And that officer, he was harassing your son for no reason with no articulable suspicion. That's a bad officer. We're going to hammer his ass." That's what happened. So I made a video calling them out, and I made a case for that. And there's been a fair amount of comments saying, regardless if they got his race incorrect, kids nowadays are wearing hoodies in all kinds of weather, yes, even when it's very hot outside. And just because the kid is looking around at the cop doesn't mean he's suspicious either. I don't get how police officers are even allowed to just pull up on a citizen and do what this officer did. The officer had no reasonable articulable suspicion. These morons, they go to like a library of moron ideas, and that's where they always get this Raz. The officer had no reasonable articulable suspicion. He committed a crime. Oh, he had no reasonable articulable suspicion that the child had committed a crime. And what the officer deemed suspicious wouldn't stand up in court on any day. Would you stop a guy in winter for wearing shorts and a t-shirt because that's suspicious? Shake my head. Well, listen, dumbass Trailblazer 46. There's so many things wrong with your comment. An officer does not need reasonable articulable suspicion to pull up on someone and ask him a question. I went ahead and gave the court's definition of a consensual encounter in my video the other day, and I'm going to put it up right here again. I think I can move my face out of the way a little bit further. It's right here. Number 1, a consensual encounter which requires no objective justification. That means that an officer can see anybody, and if that person catches their eye, the officer can walk up to that person and talk to them. They don't need reasonable articulable suspicion. Number 2, a brief investigatory detention, which must be supported by reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. What this moron is doing is he's confusing a consensual encounter with a Terry stop. When it's a Terry stop, you are detained. You are not free to go. I have reason to believe that you're up to no good, and I'm not going to let you go until I've investigated that. If I see something that just kind of catches my eye, something that's not suspicious in itself but might catch my eye, I work in the hood. I work in like one of the worst, most hardest hit neighborhoods in the city. More murders, well, it's pretty closely tied. pretty much tied with the most murders happen in the neighborhood that I work with in versus this other neighborhood in this city where I work. Almost all of the prostitution and drugs and gangs move through the neighborhood where I am. I know this area very well, and I know when things don't fit in. And I also know what criminal activity looks like. Now, if we're going to take out the criminal activity side, let's just say that I see something that is really odd to me. Let's say that walking down the street, this drug and prostitution infested street at 3 a.m, I see a woman that is just drop dead gorgeous. She's drop dead gorgeous. She's dressed to the nines. She's got this like long sequin, shining, shimmering dress. She's wearing like a little clutch purse, and she's got like 7-inch heels, and she's walking down the sidewalk, just walking down the sidewalk in this neighborhood. I might pull up to her and say, "Hey, ma'am, are you from around here? Do you know where you are? Do you need help?" That would be a consensual encounter. Because there's a casino not too far from where my patrol beat is. And there's always a chance that somebody went to the casino, got a little drunk, and took a wrong turn and went into the wrong neighborhood. I might pull up to that person, not because they're suspicious, because they don't quite fit in, and that kind of activity just kind of caught my eye. Now, the other part with this thing where, kids wear hoodies and all kinds of weather and all that, that's true. And then he also said that won't stand up in court. Yes, it would, because you can have a consensual encounter with anybody that you want. And if I'm driving along and it's 90 degrees and I see somebody with their hood pulled all up over their face, and I pull up to them and I say something like, "Hey man, did you get a haircut? I thought you had longer hair." And the kid takes his hood off and looks at me. And I have a cool conversation with the guy, and I'm like, you know what? This guy wasn't up to any crimes whatsoever. I'll say, "All right, whatever your name is," or if you don't tell me your name, "See you later," and then drive away. That's all there is to it. But there's also those chances where I might pull up on somebody and they're wearing their hoodie and all of this, and I say, "Hey man, I haven't seen you for a while. Did you get a haircut?" And then I realize they're also wearing latex gloves. And, their front of their clothes might be really dirty, does that start to make you develop some reasonable suspicion that criminal activity might be afoot? That's where a casual encounter might go from just my own curiosity to now I have reasonable suspicion. I might get out and start detaining that person. There's also this particular neighborhood. There's a lot of these kids that are out there wearing these hoodies and stuff that are breaking into cars and things. It's not just, it's the totality of the circumstances. So you just wearing a hoodie does not necessarily mean that you have a reasonable suspicion that crime is afoot, but just something catches your eye, you are allowed to go and talk to that person. That's all I really want to say. And then when it comes to court, the reason that the officer said those things in the interview, he's like, "Yeah, it was a really hot day. The guy was wearing a long sleeve hoodie with the hood pulled all the way up, blah, blah, blah." The reason the officer said those things is because those very same things have been used in court. You have to realize that. I don't have the cases in front of me because I just saw the comment and I decided to make this video. But literally in the academy, when we are taught this stuff from the department's legal advisor, and then we are reiterated on this stuff every single year, we are coached on, what cases have gone, what things make it through court, what things don't make it through court, and we are told how to articulate ourselves. And one of the things that is articulable is the fact that somebody is wearing unseasonably warm clothing. Now, it says at the end, would I stop somebody in the winter for wearing shorts and a t-shirt because that's suspicious? Honestly, it doesn't have to be suspicious, but if it was like -5 with wind chill, and we had snow on the ground, and I see somebody wearing shorts and a t-shirt and some flip-flops walking down the street, freezing their ass off, you can bet your ass I'm going to pull up next to that person and talk to them. Because situations like that could be, if it's a dude, this is not uncommon. Chick and dude get into an argument. Chick gets really mad and starts yelling at dude. Dude actually removes himself from the house to prevent domestic violence from occurring. And next thing you know, he's walking to his buddy's house several blocks away and he's freezing his nipples off. I'll pull up next to that guy. I'll be like, bro, you look really cold. Would you like a ride? Now, am I harassing that guy if he doesn't want to ride? That's actually a really good example. Got this guy wearing a thin t-shirt, some shorts, and some flip-flops. Or let's even say that he's got his work boots on. So he's got boots on, shorts, and a t-shirt. He's walking down the street. I pull up next to him. I look at him through the passenger window. I'm like, dude, you got to be freezing. What's going on? And he's like, screw you, cop. I don't want to talk to you. I'm like, man, listen, it's cold outside. Like, you got to be freezing your nipples off. And dude's like, shut the fuck up, man. I don't want to talk to you. I'm like, dude, listen, you don't got to be tough. All right. Like, it's cold. I don't even care what happened. I just want you to be safe. Can I give you a ride somewhere? And he's like, no, I don't ride with cops. You know, I might roll next to that guy for 4 or 5 minutes trying to convince him to get in my car so I can safely give him a ride somewhere. If he refuses, ultimately, that's on him. But those are the types of things that I might do. That's a completely consensual encounter. I don't need reasonable suspicion to talk to somebody. So when he says, where is it? I don't get how police officers are even allowed to just pull up to a citizen and do what the officer did. Yes. A police officer is allowed to just pull up to a citizen and talk to them. That is perfectly okay. Even if that person does not want a police officer to talk to them, it is perfectly okay for a police officer to do that. And then there are also times that very justifiably, a consensual encounter can turn into reasonable suspicion that can develop into probable cause. And these aren't even like shady situations. And I've told this story on the channel before, but this is a personal story about me. This is about a day that I came home from work and I arrested a guy in my own yard. So this was a day where, now, a little bit of backstory. I live in a pretty nice neighborhood. It's not like a ritzy neighborhood. It's a low crime neighborhood. It's very middle class. Everyone has like decent running cars. Their yards are kept. Their houses are tidy. But they're not overly large houses. You know, a bunch of 3 and 4 bedroom, just very average middle America type houses. That's my neighborhood. It's very low crime. Now, one day when I was working third shift, I was about to go to bed and my wife was, I don't know, it's summertime, I think. She was about to go somewhere. She's like, babe, there's a couple of sheriff's deputies that want to talk to you. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I had to throw on a t-shirt and some shorts, come downstairs, talk to these sheriff's deputies, and they put a picture up in my face. And they're like, hey, do you know this guy? And I was like, yeah, that's Alex. He lives next door. And they're like, oh, well, he's got a warrant for F2 drug trafficking or something like that. I was like, okay. They're like, do you think he's home? I'm like, I don't know, dude. I'm like, I work third shift. I'm going to bed. My wife saw them outside and said, hey, my husband's a police officer. Do you want to talk to him? So anyway, so I know that my neighbor had a warrant for drug trafficking. And after he got arrested, I talked to his stepfather, my neighbor, because it was my neighbor's kid that had this warrant. I talked to his stepfather. He kind of gives me the rundown on everything and how it all went down. And so I'm very well aware of this. I also knew when the kid got out of jail. So one morning on a Saturday morning, it's actually a football Saturday in Columbus, Ohio, which is a big deal because Buckeyes kind of run this city. And I was a little bit frustrated because the game was on at noon. I wanted to get home and get some sleep before the game started. And I got a little bit of overtime that morning. Not a lot of overtime, like 45 minutes. So I got home 45 minutes later than usual. I was already annoyed. At the time, I had a big Ford V8 truck that was a gas guzzler. And this is several years ago. This is probably 2014. And at the time, gas was over $4 a gallon. So I had bought a little Chevy Cruze. So my truck and my wife's car were parked in the driveway. My little Chevy Cruze was parked on the street in front of the house. And as I pulled up onto our street, there was somebody in my spot. And I was like, God, I was like, damn it. I was like, I'm already running late. I'm annoyed. So I had to park down the road. I've got my gun belt in one hand, my lunchbox and stuff in the other hand. And I'm walking from like in front of my neighbor's house. Had to pass over this area between my neighbor's house and my house. In between our garages, there's a little bit of grass there. And as I'm walking by, I see somebody standing there. Was he doing anything? No. He was just standing there. He was a younger black dude, big guy. He was probably like 6'2", 250, 260 pounds, giant freaking dome on him. He's just standing there. He's on a laptop computer, had a cell phone cord hanging out of his pocket. And with the knowledge of my dope dealing neighbor, I assumed that the neighbors, you know, the adults in the house were out of town or something, and that he was having a party, because that's happened multiple times before. And here I am walking home from work in my uniform, and I see the shithead neighbor's friend in between our houses. And whenever I saw my drug dealing neighbor's friends, I always made sure that they understood there was a police officer that lives in this house, and that I wasn't going to put up with shit from them. So I looked at this guy, and he froze. He's just standing there like, he's holding a laptop, cord hanging out, and he froze. That's not normal. So I looked at him and I said, "What are you doing, dude?" And he's like, Nothing. I didn't do nothing. Excuse me? Now, at that point in time, do I have any reasonable, articulable suspicion? No. I just thought that my neighbor had a friend over, and he was standing in between our yards. And I was just, hey, what are you doing? You know, I don't know if you guys neighbors have teenage kids, but yeah, that's who I am. Okay. When the cop lives next door, I'm like, hey man, what are you doing? And he's like, nothing. I didn't do nothing. At that point, I don't necessarily have reasonable suspicion, but my spidey sense is starting to go off, right? Like there's something fishy going on here. So then I put my duty belt down and my lunchbox down. I take a couple of steps towards him. I say, no, what the fuck are you doing? He was like, I'm coming from my cousin's house. I'm like, coming from your cousin's house? It's like, why are you coming from the backyard? At that time, I kind of reduced a little bit, but I'm like, you're coming from the backyard. That doesn't make any sense. He goes, yeah, we always come through the back. I go, no, nobody in my neighborhood comes from their back door. And I was like, who's your cousin? And he's like, trying to come up with a name. I go, what house did you come out of? And this motherfucker goes like this. He points at my house. At that point in time, I had reasonable, articulable suspicion that criminal activity was afoot. I had a guy that he definitely doesn't belong here. Couldn't articulate where he came from or why he was coming from there. And then when I asked what house he came out of, he said he came out of my house. So then I ordered him down to the ground. He actually complied. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. 911. Hey, this is Officer Ben. Here's my badge. Here's my address. I have a guy detained in my backyard. I need you to send me some officers. They're like, okay, we have a 3 out on you. I said, thanks a lot. I'm going to hang up now so I have my hands. Put my phone back in my pocket, and the dude's still laying there looking up at me. Now, remember, I put my lunchbox and my duty belt on the ground. I took a couple steps forward. So I'm reaching back. I'm grabbing for my cuff case, and you hear my cuff case come open. I pop that thing open. When you heard that cuff case come open, and I just remember I got my finger on one of the cuffs, and I'm trying to pull it out. This dude jumps up, goes running into my yard. And I'm like, son of a bitch. I don't know why he's running, but I'm chasing him. I got reasonable suspicion. This motherfucker's detained. So he goes running to my yard. I'm like, this guy's fat. He's 6'2" and fat, you know, and like he's running. I think he ran out of his shoes as I was chasing. I was like, I'm catching his ass. He's not getting out of my yard. So he runs through my yard, ends up, we get to the fence on the other side. I'm like, oh, he's done. I only have like a 4-foot fence. It's not a privacy fence or anything. It's just like a picket fence. That son of a bitch jumps over the fence. I jump over the fence. I get on top of him. I'm not going to rehash the whole story, but I'm not a small guy, and I've had some fights and stuff in my day. He's getting up, and I get on his back, and I've got him in a headlock. And I was like, you need to stay down. And this son of a bitch stands straight up. I'm 5'9", he's 6'2". I'm standing on my toes, holding on to him, for dear life. And I was like, get on the ground. I go to hip toss him. I had nothing. I couldn't hip toss him. Like, his hip was higher than my hip, and he was big and he was heavy, and I wasn't hip tossing that son of a bitch. I ended up, I still had my arm on him, and then it dawned on me that this part of my forearm was right here in his chin, and I was back behind him. I fucking grabbed my wrist, cranked that thing down, and he dropped like a sack of potatoes. I ended up going north-south on him. I got him a headlock. He's out here. This is in 2014. Next thing out of his mouth is, I can't breathe. So I let up a little bit. The second I let up, he puts his hands down, tries to stand up. Next thing you know, gets a little bit tighter and gets a little bit harder to breathe. That's the only way I had to hold on to this guy. He's saying he can't breathe. We did this like 3 times. And then the one time I tightened back up, and I was like, listen, motherfucker, if you try to get up, I will fucking kill you. Like, this is when it gets real. So officers ended up coming. I had a little bit of blood on my bicep because he had an earring, and I was cranking down on his earring with my bicep. They cuff him up, put him in the car. Turns out the car that was in my parking spot where I normally park was his. And I told the officers to take a look at it. And when they did, they opened up the back hatch, and there were flat screen TVs stacked all the way up. He had 7 TVs in the back of this van. We then walked back through my yard because I had to walk like the crime scene investigators through the yard. And and the other thing that happened while they opened up that van, they saw the TVs. Calls started coming in that people's houses were burglarized overnight. Turns out this guy and his accomplice parked a van in front of my house, went through my backyard, jumped over my fence to go to the neighborhood behind my house, and we're going to everyone's back door, their back sliding door, and checking it. A lot of people, like I said, this is a low crime neighborhood. They leave their back sliding doors unlocked. These guys were tiptoeing into these houses while people were asleep, unplugging their TVs, removing them, putting them over my fence, walking through my gate, out in front of my house, putting the TVs in this minivan, and then going and doing it again. I remember it was a purple, like Chrysler minivan. I'm pretty sure it was a purple Plymouth Voyager. And back in 2014, this thing was probably like a 2007 or 2008 piece of shit van. But that's a situation where I didn't have any reasonable articulable suspicion to talk to the guy. He was just a guy, and I was just a guy. I saw him. I chose to talk to him. The way he responded to me became more and more suspicious until I developed reasonable suspicion that criminal activity was afoot, because he said he just came out of my house. He was detained at that point in time. Up until that point in time, he was not detained. You don't need a reason to talk to somebody. Like, the fact that he was standing in between our houses was not particularly suspicious. It was odd. It was enough to catch my eye, but it wasn't something that I could take to court. The rest of it, sure as shit, went to court. He took a plea deal, got 4 years out of that. But that's the reason that these consensual encounters exist. You know, it might just be that guy walking down the street when it's freezing cold out in shorts and a t-shirt and needs a ride, and I'm trying to help him. But also it might be that person that there's just something strange about that person, and I want to talk to that person. And then while I'm talking to that person, I might realize, you know what, this person is up to no good. It goes from just a consensual encounter, no detention, they're free to go, they don't have to answer your questions or anything, so then maybe you do develop something and you can detain them. But I've been doing this for 12 years. I have consensual encounters all the time. One of the other reasons I might kind of consensually encounter somebody is because they might be doing something suspicious, and I don't want them to commit a crime, and I don't feel like getting into it. You know, like the homeless people lurking around in alleys, a lot of them are looking for cars to break into, garages to break into, and all these other things. I might just roll right up to them. Hey man, what you up to? Nothing, I'm just walking. I'm just scrapping in the trash. Oh, okay. Hey man, do you think you got any warrants right now? No, I don't have any warrants. What's your name? Punch them in the computer. They don't have any warrants. I'm like, all right, dude, I'll see you later. Next thing you know, they're walking out on the street because they know that they just got caught in that alley. just these consensual encounters are also officer presence situations. You know, I can literally walk up to any citizen that I want to, drive up to any citizen that I want to, speak to any citizen that I want to, just so that everybody knows the police are here. A lot of those consensual encounters are positive interactions. You know, this kid who's walking down the street with his hoodie up and his hood drawn over his face, officer might have pulled up to him, and the kid's like looking over his shoulder at him and all this stuff. Every time the officer drives by, officer drives up, "Hey man, what are you up to?" Kid looks at him, he's got tears running down his face. The reason he had his hoodie drawn up is because he was upset and he didn't want people to see him crying, because maybe something bad just happened to him. These things are all things that it's not necessarily Raz, but it's something that draws my attention to somebody. I don't need a reason. I do not need a reason to talk to somebody. It is right here. I'll move this out of the way again. Number 1, a consensual encounter which requires zero objective justification. As a police officer, I can talk to anybody I want. These people that have this mindset, they need to get over it. And if you talk to these people with this mindset, call them names, ridicule them, make them embarrassed for their lack of knowledge. That's it for today, guys. I'll talk to you later.